Okay, let's kick it off. Okay, so thank you very much for coming. My name is Christopher Lewis, and I'm a lead solutions architect working for Broadcom. I'm sitting in what we call the VCF specialist team, and essentially my day job is to talk to customers about ARIA. I like to say that I sort of sell the dream of ARIA, and I leave it to PSO to worry about the actual reality of delivering it. But essentially, I've worked for VMware. Actually, let's do my disclaimer slide first. Not that it matters when I'm talking about myself, but click on the screen. Here we go. Right, okay, so just the general Broadcom disclaimer. And as you'll see in the next couple of slides, as a solutions architect, my day job is to talk about ARIA. When I'm not doing my day job, in fact, when I'm doing my day job, I tend to talk to lots of people, lots of product managers, lots of development engineers, and I hear lots of things about what's going on in 9. And if that blurs today while I'm talking, I apologise in advance. This disclaimer says whatever I say might not happen, basically, but hopefully it will. Very brief agenda. Some of you, as I asked before we started, not many people use automation, so I just want to briefly go over what it is. Then we'll talk about what's new, well, I've got one slide on what's next, because Joe talked about it this morning, so that means I can talk about it this afternoon without being told off. And then the question and answers. Anytime you want to ask a question, please just raise your hand, and we'll do that during the session anyway. As I said, my name is Christopher Lewis, lead solutions architect working in the sort of the pre-sales technical space. I've worked for VMware for about 5 years, 6 months now, and throughout that time have worked on the artist formerly known as vRealize automation, ARIA automation, in fact vCloud Center automation prior to that. And I've worked with VMware products for the last probably about 20 odd years of my career, so I like to think I'm T-shaped. I have a really good understanding of the portfolio, but I go really deep in the cloud management space, essentially. So what is ARIA automation? Actually, before we talk about what is ARIA automation, let's talk about cloud management from a VCF perspective. And really, we're interested in 4 sort of key use cases from a sort of a holistic view. So when I talk about cloud management, I also talk about ops as well, and ops or logs, and network insight as well, or sorry, ARIA operations for networks, or VCF network operations this month. 4 key sort of capabilities: the automated service delivery, which is what we're going to talk about today, cost and capacity, which is the ops piece, performance and troubleshooting, ops and logs, and networking to an extent, and then the governance and compliance. A little bit of everything really comes into that governance and compliance point of view. And actually, when I think about it, and I normally have another slide and I forgot to put it in, there are 4 key products: automation, operations for log and network operations. And those were the same key products when I started 5 years ago. And we sort of blurred the lines a little bit by buying Cloud Health, SaltStack, and all these other things that came into the portfolio, and those have gradually been taken out again to reduce the complexity, to focus on the private cloud, and because that's where we're going from a business perspective, because the strategy has changed. As we've sort of, through the acquisition, the strategy has moved away from multi-cloud first to private cloud and hybrid cloud first. I like to think of it as a right cloud first strategy. From a cloud management perspective, we still support you whether you want to use public cloud or private cloud. So it's really where that workload should live is where we'll support you putting it. So from an automation perspective, the biggest thing it does is give you this self-service catalog. And that's the ability to go, or your end users, might not be you, might be your end users, to go to an Amazon-style shop and say, I'll have one of those, please. And I'll have it in small, medium, or large, or red, green, and blue, gold, silver, bronze, whatever you want to call it, however you want to declare that particular service that you're trying to deliver. And then layer governance around that. So maybe not everybody can see all of the bits. Maybe not everybody can, or maybe some people have to have an approval when they go and order something, and that sort of stuff. So the governance layer is really important. Multi-cloud automations I sort of talked about a little while ago. Whether that be in AWS, Azure, Google, Oracle VMware Cloud Solution, OCVS, Oracle VMware, Oracle Compute VMware Service, sorry. or on-premises VCF. Infrastructure as code at its heart, API first. So whether you're into infrastructure as code, whether you're into APIs, or whether you're into user interface, then we cover all those aspects. We have extensibility. So the extensibility via the event broker is really about, because when we think about our automation and what it does, it's very bare bones. It's all about vSphere template cloning. You know, that's when you get to the crux of it, which you can do in vCenter. But what vCenter doesn't give you is the ability to do everything else around that deployment of the service without having to have other products. And if you want to do it in vCenter, then everybody has to have access to vCenter, which is never a good idea. So what we have is this extensibility solution, or this event broker, that allows us to call off at different points of the deployment, or the request stage, or after a machine's been deployed, before a machine's been deployed, you know, security groups, networks. It's like 60 odd different places where you can call out to third-party systems using Node.js, Python, PowerShell, JavaScript, using either our orchestrator engine or our ABX functions as a service platform. And then we wrap all that, as I said, from a service catalog perspective in a level of governance, and that governance could be users within a project. So if a user is a user's in a project and that project doesn't have access to AWS, can't deploy to AWS. If he has access to AWS and vCenter, he could potentially deploy to both. But actually, if he's not given the visibility of the public cloud templates, he won't be able to deploy the public cloud templates, and so on and so forth. So various levels of governance that we apply on that, as well as approvals, data actions, and so on and so forth. For me, these are the 4 key use cases. So we talked about self-service cloud, and that can be really important to getting away from the sort of the 80% of the stuff that you might have to do all the time, and giving that away and automating that and giving you more time back. Obviously, hybrid cloud, Kubernetes as well. Infrastructure as code and DevOps is another big use case for us. And then you'll be surprised on how important anything as a service is from a capability perspective. The ability to literally script anything that you want and then put it in the service catalog. That could be a user account, could be a new storage LUN, could be a new virtual switch, it could be anything that you want. Really, the possibilities are endless, just really limited by how much time you've got and your imagination, really. And obviously, we don't necessarily want to automate everything, because if you're doing a process that you do once a year, it takes you 10 minutes, why would you automate it? Why would you spend days trying to work out how to automate it? But if you're doing that on a daily basis or even on a weekly basis, and it takes a lot of time and you're the only person that can do it, that's when you start to look at how you can automate. And with the anything as a service piece, we can then sort of include that into the templates that we have for just deploying virtual machines. And one of the examples I tend to give is the ability to, for example, install SQL Server, where you've got, might need a service account created in the Active Directory before you deploy the virtual machine, before you install SQL. And you can do all that in one single template, and then manage that user or service account through the catalog as well. There are 4 key services. Service Broker is our service catalog. Assembler is the heart of the platform that enables us to connect to clouds, see resources, create different policies and templates. Orchestrator is that business process engine. Pipelines is our CI/CD pipeline. The first thing to tell you, if you didn't know already, and it's announced in 8.18.1, is pipelines is no longer going to be around. So that's our artist formerly known as CodeStream. As of 8.18.1, in fact, VCF 9, pipelines will be deprecated. So anybody that's, in fact, it's deprecated now, and in 9 it won't be there, essentially. It's the current sort of train of thought. And that's, actually, it's announced in all release notes, so I can talk about it, finally. So if you are doing anything in pipelines, now's the time to shift to another pipelining tool. If you're not doing anything in pipelines, why not? But no, if you're not, then that's fine. But it was a really cool tool, a really useful tool, and quite a lot of large companies were using it, but just not enough large companies were using it. And therefore, as a software company, we need to concentrate our development activities on the features and functions that customers are using. And right now, unfortunately, people aren't. And prior to 8, that was actually a separate product anyway, so it's probably why it's not used as often or as much as it should be. I sort of covered this a little bit, really, I guess, in the fact that it's all about the whole end-to-end thing, the whole end-to-end process of deploying applications or services, using that VCF platform underlying to be able to deliver end-user services, but then also empowering end users to be able to consume those services and actually manage those on their own without having to have potentially your sort of interaction with them as well. So whether the original deployment, or whether they want to expand it, whether they want to delete it, whether there's approvals in place, essentially we're just trying to make the end user the owner of their own destiny, essentially, from that perspective. And what we've done in 8.18 is introduce something called the Cloud Consumption Interface. And now the Cloud Consumption Interface is actually something that we created as part of vSphere Plus. So vSphere Plus has something called the Cloud Consumption Interface, and it was backed by RA Automation, SaaS, and obviously that sort of line of products has now been deprecated and has gone away. And so we pulled into RA Automation the Cloud Consumption Interface. And what the Cloud Consumption Interface is backed by supervisor services to allow you to deploy services and applications and Kubernetes containers in a Kubernetes sort of kubeadmin, kubectl sort of way, and the ability to do that. And it's changing and shifting the way that we start to do cloud templates as well. And going forward, we're expecting the classic resources, which is what we're doing right now, to stay, but then more and more effort being put into the Cloud Consumption Interface and the supervisor style services that allow us to be a little bit more sort of GitOps and agile and more sort of Kubernetes forward-looking. But essentially, what we're doing at the moment is allowing you to have both, because we have we have a heritage of sort of customers who are currently using what we're now classing as classic style capabilities and cloud templates. And actually, from an enterprise perspective, it's really important to have those, because what you start to see is enterprises are trying to not necessarily constrain developers, but allow them to have sufficient leeway to develop, but also provide some sort of guardrails around that. And that's where the classic type of resources will come into that. Whereas Cloud Consumption Interface basically allows developers, or going forward will allow developers to treat the private cloud like it's a public cloud IaaS solution. So I want a virtual machine, I want to add a network to that and start to build services like that, which is where we want to get to from a solution perspective. But we also need to be able to have those end user catalogs that still have the cloud templates. Just a little bit more on the service. So essentially, as again over it, curated catalogs using the templates is what we're doing now. That enhanced sort of consumption developer experience from the end user perspective using the Kubernetes API. And it started to move now, and as we move into 9, that will only get more and more from that perspective. But right now, it's a hybrid solution that supports both. Okay, so to the crux of the session, essentially what I'm going to talk about is how VCF 5.1 has merged into 5.2 and the capabilities that have changed. So obviously we talked about the Cloud Consumption Interface, and that came in as part of 8.16.2, which I think might have been in 5.1, I can never remember, or 8.16.1 might have been 5.1. Cloud Consumption Interface, no, it's not.
We've got 8.16.2.
Okay, so you might have decoupled. Did you decouple?
Well, we have decoupled, yes.
Right. Okay. Yeah. So yeah. So that's there. We introduced the private AI capability. I've got some more slides on that. We'll ignore the home page. Some more CCI elements. It's fine. We'll look at those in a second. This was actually something. So this multi-tenant RA automation. So when we first started deploying RA operations and automation in version 8, We could have multiple tenants, but you could only ever have one ops talking to one automation tenant. So that's a big win from that perspective. I'm not sure how it's going to merge into VCF 9, but at the moment, so now you can have multiple tenants in an ops system, which is good. We deprecated TKG and TMC endpoints. Dark mode, you cannot imagine how much dark mode means to some people. I couldn't care less personally, but it is important to some people. What else do we have in there? Oh, and data actions via WebMKS could be pretty important as well for some customers. Again, the good thing with ARIA automation, but the problem with ARIA automation is that we do quite a lot already. So these incremental updates tend to be not that sort of show-stopping. When we come to 9, we'll start to see some show-stopping changes, which we'll sort of get to in the end. In 8.18.1, we've got the deprecation of pipelines. We've stopped supporting migration of NSX T and V because you should be there already. This is a really key one as well, the NSX sort of tag constraints. One of the biggest issues I had with customers is that when you have multiple NSX environments and multiple, even NSX federation, when you deployed a security group to do microsegmentation, it didn't necessarily end up on the NSX that you expected it to end up. So you couldn't do NSX security group as a service, which is one of my customer requirements. So now we support tag-based placement. You'll be able to do that. This is for me is the killer feature of 8.18, or in fact since 8.17 probably, is the fact that now, and you could argue that it should have been there in the first place. Well, that's a different debate, but essentially what would happen is if you had multiple cloud zones that are on the same vCenter, or in fact across vCenters, you couldn't migrate a virtual machine because our automation would lose where it was. That's now been fixed in 8.18.1. So now you can vMotion workloads from one cloud zone to another, either within a data center or within a vCenter or across vCenters as well, using vMotion and SRM as well. The only issue I found with that is it updates the endpoint, but doesn't tell you that it's done it. So it moves it in the background, but doesn't actually have any sort of action that's associated with that, and I've sort of raised that from that perspective. CCI enhancements, some template design enhancements, nothing that's sort of too interesting, to be honest. Increased the config maximums of the power of virtualized SCSI. Again, I don't know that many people that have 64 disks on a SCSI device, but there are people there, I guess. The main things around 8.16 or 8.17 plus is private AI and the cloud consumption interface, essentially. Any questions? See what I can do from. I definitely can't show you private AI, but let's see if I can show you some other stuff. Let's pause that. Should I close my Zoom window? So this is the lab I sort of broke yesterday, but hopefully it will work enough. So this is actually one of the hands-on labs environments. Has anybody used hands-on labs before? Yeah, okay, cool. I won't go on that rhetoric then. But essentially, this is not in hands-on labs at the moment, but this is be the new version in January. But sorry, what's that mean? What way? Yeah, I can zoom in. Yeah. Has anybody got any questions about anything I've said? Anybody got any questions about automation in general?
I'll throw one out there.
Yeah.
Orchestrator.
Yeah.
Is that staying around?
Yes.
Or is that going to be fully just merged into? Well, obviously it's already in VRA, but is it going to exist as a standalone
it's still going to, so in VCF 9, from what I know, automation and orchestrator will still can be converged, but then also you'll be able to deploy it separately as well, and in VVF as well. Any question? Sorry, you were going to.
Yeah, I mean, for the native actions, so what they seem to be missing is like add network cards, So apparently what's not, so in Automation 7, you could actually do that by default. It was built into the box, but
Yeah.
add network cards or, like manipulate network cards was missed out.
Yes. Is there a reason for that? So I don't know the reason for that from a custom data. I mean, obviously you could do it with a custom data action. From an out of the box action, the issues you're going to have is because it's declarative infrastructure as code. As soon as you add another network, it's just going to trash the machine and rebuild it probably. Is the issue because you could do an update. You could if you wanted to add another network in a different version of your template, you could add another network and then do an update. But depending on what that update does, it could rebuild the virtual machine. But I mean, it is a good use case, I must admit.
It's very common. I mean, every VM, you have multiple layers. You have the
Yeah.
management layer, you have the data layer, so you have to have multiple network cards. So it seems like, for me, it's a big mess.
Yeah, I mean, there's nothing in the spec that would stop you adding more through Orchestrator or vCenter or anything like that. But I agree. Then ideally it would be via data action, so it can be tracked.
Yeah, because I mean, users always request, adding network cards and stuff like that. So
Yeah.
I'm struggling to get out of 7.6 just because of these kind of features.
Yeah, I mean, I must admit that you're the first person probably that's talked to me about wanting as a data action to add a network card. Normally they've already spec'd out that system and they've deployed it as it's spec'd, and if they want to make the change, then they would deploy something new. But I can see the use case. I can see it from a service provider as well perspective. I don't know of anything that's happening in 9 that will support that, if I'm honest. That said, I would never say never. It's something I can definitely go and ask about. But yeah, I haven't seen anything that, in all the conversations that I've had with, across the globe around internally as well as externally, that use case doesn't come up very often. I'm not saying it doesn't. I'm just saying that it's not talked about very often, and maybe it's one of those things that isn't. Is there?
Yeah.
Okay. I'll have to have a look then to see what because it could be. So as a software company, we're sort of beholden to what our customers want, essentially. And if there's a reason to do it, we would do it. It may be that because there's a workaround, as in the custom data action, to do that, then there's maybe seen as not a requirement to fulfill right now. It's anything I can suggest, but I can definitely look into it. We'll catch up afterwards. I'll take a picture of your card and then I'll see what I can find out. Where were we? So yeah, from an interface perspective, not a lot of change. I was going to show you CCI, but I managed to break it. So we can have a look at the namespaces. But so essentially, from a CCI perspective, you would now start to create namespaces as an end user here. But as you can see, I managed to break my namespace. Well, this bit works, but then when I start to add anything. So here, when you create, so these are the services that are available via the supervisor cluster within vCenter. But as soon as I start to try and create anything, it starts to, or at least it did start to show red errors everywhere. Like that.
Going back to looking at this and you're going with Tanzu and Kubernetes.
Yeah.
Have we got Tanzu working on stretched clusters yet?
I don't think so. I think it's still a requirement to have. I honestly don't know, John, to be honest, but I think it's still a standard cluster only. I haven't seen anything about it being on stretched.
Yeah, it's just, as I say, it was one of the things that kind of tripped us up.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of the, so the supervisor services are in 9 are going to be, the place to be. So it will be that's where we'll start to support them, because and the issue, one of the issues I guess is that from stretch clustering tends to be an EMEA thing rather than an Americas thing. So quite a lot of American companies don't want to do stretch clustering, and it's very much EMEA focused activities, and so there is that sort of barrier we have to get over with the development teams to say, well, actually, I know American customers aren't asking for it very much, but it's quite heavily used in EMEA. And it is a barrier we're definitely getting over, so I'm hoping that in 9 it'll be supported. But
yeah, because I mean, the stretch clustering, I mean, we've lost a data center, and 2 minutes later, everything's back up and running. The other one, which was basically our use case. It's just then discovering that we can't run Tanzu on this.
Yeah, I mean, obviously you've got the things like the Kubernetes zones and stuff. I mean, it's more of a Kubernetes it's more of a VMware Kubernetes service issue than an ARA issue. So it's not really my area of expertise. But obviously they have the Kubernetes zones now, which allows you, or the vSphere supervisor zone, sorry, that allows you to stripe across multiple clusters. But I don't believe that's stretch clusters. I think that's individual clusters. So I guess they have a way to do high availability from that perspective, from an application level perspective, but they don't necessarily have it on stretch cluster. Yeah. So if this was working, this is where I would go and create my Tanzu Kubernetes grid cluster. And to be fair, Hands-on Labs 250109 does exactly this, but I upgraded ARIA automation, and then it broke it. So it was more the lab that's been broken than the product. So I was running the same scripts that I would run on an old version on this new version, and obviously there's a subtle difference that we need to look at. But so the platform sound, it's just the fact that the script I ran to do all of the namespace stuff, because in 18.0 there is no user interface for cloud consumption interface to enable it and configure it. You have to do it via Kubernetes APIs. So we had some scripts that I just ran on this to do that. And there's obviously, we need to retrospectively look at the scripts that we've got to do that. But so to be clear, there's nothing wrong with CCI. There's nothing wrong with the Hands-on Labs. It's just the combination that I put together last night that caused it to break. And you can start to deploy. Again, I'm not too sure if this will work, or if it's going to. That's the same issue. You can start to deploy virtual machines. I can't do it, but as you go through with the cloud consumption interface, what it's doing is it's building the YAML on the right-hand side for you to run against a Kubernetes API. So as I sort of start to change different things, the YAML gets updated, and I can scroll down and I can choose. I think there's a problem with VM classes, which is why that's not showing. And the storage classes are broken again from what I'm doing. But as you start to go through the virtual machine, you'll end up with the YAML that you need. You can start adding cloud in it and all that sort of stuff, exactly as you would with a preformed template. But you're building it as you go, and then you can just deploy it. And then once you're happy with that, you can then create a catalog item for the same thing as well, if you wanted to do that. As I say, it builds. It's essentially that sort of the deploy.yaml from a Kubernetes perspective. And unfortunately, the person who wrote all the scripts, it's obviously in America, and it's Thanksgiving today, so it's not something they're going to answer. I can't show you private AI because I don't have the hardware. But so that's the supervisor services, and again, you can do. We do one of the demos, that allows us to deploy things like Argo CD as part of the deployment and stuff like that, using the definitions that are out there. So we've got a beta version of Argo CD that you can use to deploy this as well. You can deploy Argo CD, deploy a virtual machine, and sort of run that through from a pipelines perspective. I'm not going to show you dark mode because I refuse. We'll have a quick look at the templating stuff. So again, we can start to simple things that we probably should have done in the first place, to be honest, but start to able to sort of scale out what we're looking at. Because when you've got multiple machines, multiple sort of applications and services running in here, the YAML can get really long. So we started to allow you to sort of shrink that up, which is one of the new features. I don't have a CCI resource in here, but we've now started to support AVI services as well. So advanced load balancer as it was, so AVI as it was, and then advanced load balancer, and now AVI again. From a sort of a profiles perspective. And again, we haven't stopped supporting, just because we're private cloud focused, we haven't stopped supporting AWS, Azure, Google from a cloud consumption perspective. That's all still there. What else is new? There's nothing there. From a, it's a bit of a boring demo actually, this one, but if I look at slating my own demos here, but if I take this HOL Windows machine that's sitting on workload cluster 1, and historically if I moved it, then it would fail or it would lose view of it. And so if I go, takes a little while to do, so I'll let it run and then I'll come back to it. I can now migrate that to my management cluster because I've only got 2 clusters, but under the same, they're 2 separate cloud zones under the same data center. So I'll do storage and the network vMotion, compute, sorry, vMotion. It's fine. Let that run in the background, and eventually that will, after a collection, that will update to the management cluster. As I said, there's still work to be done. I mean, I hope to see that in the history, or have it as a data action, and so we've sort of raised some requests around that as well. Any questions? As I said, the issue with automation, to an extent, it's a good issue. It's a relatively stable platform. So the incremental updates we make are very tiny and will be really impactful for some people. And other people are like, why are you showing me that? Don't care. You know, and that's the bit where we are. But when we move to VCF 9, there's going to be a whole heap of changes. But we'll talk about that in a second. Trying to think if there's anything else that I found was interesting. I did see something else. Where was it? So these are the new wizards. So if you haven't deployed yet, and you're looking to deploy, and you want some sort of quick wins, these are the sort of the wizards to help you do the quick wins. Obviously, some more sort of information about how the cloud's running. That's a bit of a weird picture. Where was it? I saw something. I thought, oh, that's really interesting. That's assembler. Must have been in Service Broker. Projects, content policy, infrastructure. No, I can't remember where it was now. I saw something, I think it was yesterday, and I was like, oh, that's really quite cool. No, can't remember. Right, anyway. So let's stop the demo because I'm starting to ramble. Sorry. Okay, God, start from the beginning. It's helpful. Right. Okay. It's fine. So we sort of talk about the cloud admin dashboard. I'm hoping they're going to bring back the proper home screen they had in 7, where you could have updates for people. That would be really cool in 9. Don't know how many times I have to ask, but hopefully that will come back. Again, setting up the cloud, those wizards there allow you to sort of start to build different templates and apply different policies. So we're trying to focus on people getting up and running, because once you're up and running, you can start to use the product a little bit more, dark mode, whatever. Unsuccessfully demonstrated the cloud consumption interface, but essentially building that YAML file as you go through. You can throw cloud in it as well from that perspective, and then deploy your virtual machines from there. You'll start to see more and more cloud consumption interfaces in resources, so supervisor resources in there, and in 8.18.1 there's even more. And we're starting to create component blueprints as well, again, but only in the cloud consumption interface. So you can say, well, this is my application, and it's made up of lots of different things, and I can have more than one application that's coming. It's fine. Yeah. So this is, and then you can start to create cloud consumption templates as well. So again, we want people to use the cloud consumption interface from a development perspective, really, about having access to do that and getting out of the way of that sort of innovation. But then once you've got where you want to be, then we want to convert that to a template so that other people can consume it as well. Is that the one with Argo? No. Private AI, the buzzwords. It's a small market at the moment. It's growing. There's a lot of interest in private AI. And when you enable the private AI services on VCF, you're then enabled to deliver sort of certain amounts of deployments, so certain different types of deployments, whether that be an AI workstation. I think there's a list somewhere. But essentially, you configure it and going through all of your AI stuff. And again, because it's mainly Kubernetes sort of based, typically. Let's go through this. Yeah. So you've got sort of Kubernetes cluster, AI workstation. There's now a RAG workstation as well. Don't have that slide here, sorry. So again, it's a small market right now that's expanding exponentially, and we're behind that. And what should I say? It's a small number of customers, but rather than a small market that are using it, and it's expanding. Lots of effort being put into making it easy to be able to deliver AI services on premises, because really, if you've got your own data and you're running AI workloads against your own data, you don't really want to do that in the public cloud. So RAG workstation, inferencing servers. And so those are all out of the box, so you don't have to do that sort of development yourself. You can just request those. They're all out of the box capabilities. Sort of a marketing-y slide, really. From an automation perspective, there are genuine benefits from using automation. From a sort of like a reduction in the time it takes to do things, or an increased productivity perspective. And this is actually not me saying it. This is actually from a total economic impact study, actually of August this year. 3% reduction in downtime, 7,900 hours of sort of productivity savings. Even this surprised me. The ability to reduce reduce time to deploy a virtual machine by 50%, which was interesting, because you would think a virtual machine is relatively quick anyway, but actually to reduce that time by 50% was pretty interesting from using automation. And let's say, marketing. So what's next? So the only thing I can really talk about is something that Joe mentioned today, which is about multi-tenancy. So it's something that we're going to be doing in 9 is taking sort of some of the VMware Cloud Director features and bringing them into the platform. So VCF Automation is going to be a hybrid capability which includes VMware Cloud Director and ARIA Automation. We're calling it VCF Automation right now from an ARIA perspective, but essentially in VCF 9, VCF Automation will be that sort of joined up thinking, which arguably we should have done in the past, around having hard tenancy for customers that want it. So we'll have a tenancy for, again, you don't have to use it as single tenant or multi-tenant. It really depends on your use case. There's still a use case for having projects, but we're taking all of those capabilities from VMware Cloud Director that people sort of know and love, and bringing that and actually listening to our customers and sort of taking that in and going, well, actually, now's the right time to converge those products rather than having two competing products.
Is there a limit on the number of tenancies you could have? Because I mean,
so in right now it's 20.
Yeah.
6,000 projects, 20 tenants. In VCF 9, I don't know what the limits are on VCD, so I don't know what the limits will be for VCF 9. But it's definitely more than 20. It's in the hundreds, I think. So. Hundreds, yeah.
Because hundreds is probably going to be suitable.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, we're using projects really.
Yeah.
Where we should be using tenancies
Well,
just down to be.
So I mean, it comes.
We've got,
So I mean, in our automation, obviously you can have those 20 tenants, and a tenant is essentially a different catalog, and because you can share blueprints across tenants and so on and so forth, but it's essentially just a different catalog. So it really depends on the use case. Quite a lot of people, when they say they want multi-tenancy, in the past, if they bought when they couldn't have VCD, people say we want multi-tenants, and they actually mean what they want is isolation, and that you can get that through projects, which is why we talked about.
As I say, that's basically what we've done so far. It's just whether or not there would be any gain by.
So what VCD will give you is that infrastructure multi-tenancy rather than a catalog multi-tenancy. So the ability to carve up parts of your infrastructure into tenants. So the vSphere level rather than just the catalog level. So there is potential, and I think it's going to be pretty awesome, to be honest. But
what's the timescale for that? Is that likely to be in 9.0 or are we likely to have to wait for that? I know we've got mindful that it's roadmap and change.
So the plan is to have that as soon as possible. I'm not going to say 9.0. I think it will be 9.0, okay. But we as a company, we don't talk about 9.0 anymore. We just talk about 9, because we don't know when features are going to land, because we've got this aspiration, about fixing everything, and we can't do that all at once. So there is going to be a journey that we want you to come on with us to do that. But I think that's going to be in 9.
Yeah, it's more about whether it's likely to be within the next 12 months.
I think it's going to be from day one. Yeah, I think it's going to be from day one, but again, that is subject to change. So.
Which way round is merging? As in VRA into VCD or VCD?
No, it's VCD. It's VCD into VCF rather than into ARIA Automation, because there'll be a tenant manager, there'll be all sorts of other things, and some of those key capabilities from VMware Cloud Director will be integrated into VCF Automation. But VCF Automation doesn't mean ARIA Automation; it means VCF Automation. So it's going to be as I said, it's going to be that hybrid. It's not that we won the war against VCD or anything like that. It's a very much we're taking the best capabilities of both products and creating VCF Automation.
I'm just thinking from which one you lay over the top of another, it will be easier to
Yeah. It will be it will be that rather than the other way around. Yeah. Okay. And on that note, make sure you fill out your survey to win your VCF branded gear, because who wouldn't want a pair of trainers that had VCF on them? I certainly would. But yeah, any other questions, then we can take that offline. Okay, thanks very much. And don't forget to come to the VCF certification session next, which is somewhere over there.